And hey, everyone, it's Evan Kirstel on this fabulous Friday with one of my favorite followers from Twitter, Brian Wallace of Now Sourcing. Brian, it's been a minute. How are you?
Indeed, it has, Evan. I feel like we have not chatted in a while. And I feel like whenever most of the times we chat, it's like we're just having a conversation with the universe. So, hi, Evan. Hi,
Absolutely. Well, you never know who's watching out there in the universe. And, I wanted to catch up among other reasons. You have some pretty big news. You're kind of a big deal to me already as,
Aw.
a thought leader in marketing and content creation and
Yeah.
digital and all kinds of things. But you have some particular news that I thought would be interesting to our audience, and it was mind blowing to me. So why don't you share the
Yeah,
news, the big news?
for sure. So, there is a particular ratings agency out in the world by the name of Clutch, which is okay. Yeah, you already have it up on the screen. And there are endless kinds of marketing and advertising categories. The kind of company that I am happens to fit into a particular kind of online and digital marketing called content marketing. I really do something like even more specific than content marketing, but just for simplicity's sake, we're
We're
going to
going to
call it
get
content.
into all of what you do because it is fascinating, but let's
Indeed.
not
But right
distract from
now,
this
we're going to
amazing
talk about
recognition. Yeah.
yeah, we're going to talk about a little abstraction up into the overall field of content marketing. We can get into what that is. But yeah, out of about 17,000 different firms that this particular rating agency ranks.
17,000. I didn't know there were 17,000 firm content marketing firms, but
Yeah,
I
I
guess
never
there are.
sat and counted, but I mean, if you think about it, there's definitely marketers in every major city in the world. So I don't see why it wouldn't be 17,000. For all we know, there's even more than that. And this came out like right around April 1st. So it's like, I'm not just putting this as a gag or something on the internet. And I thought that that was pretty noteworthy. I am very hesitant. Like, I think that there's like a lot of clout chasing people on the internet. And like, there are
Yeah,
people that
yours truly included. But yes, besides
no, no, come
this,
on, Evan. No, no, you know what I mean. There's people that like literally are like buying verifications and
oh, buying followers. Yeah, totally.
buying
Get it.
followers, buying verification symbols. They say that they're featured in the media, but it's a press release or they paid for it to be. You know what I mean? There's all of the dark arts of the
Welcome to
internet.
the new world. Yeah,
Yeah,
brave new world.
no thanks. I'll go back to the old world. But like, there's endless amounts of scams and schemes and look good kinds of things. But I thought this was certainly notable. Like I don't really like to toot my own horn, but for something like this, I think it's important to have like a level of professional ego because if people aren't going to kind of stand up for you always, I mean, I think your friends always will and like your close followers and whatnot. But I thought that this was particularly noteworthy, and lots of people have been wanting to talk to me about it. So it's definitely done its thing. So we're really
Well,
excited
let's
here.
talk about it. Let's talk about you and now sourcing.
Yes, sir.
First of all, tell us how you founded the company, and
Yeah,
you're a band of brothers, a small company, but you
indeed.
have an oversized impact, I think, out there on
I would
social
agree.
media. So what
Yeah.
do you do exactly? Explain to folks what you do.
Yeah. I mean, on that last part, I think a lot of people ask the wrong questions, especially like before the pandemic. People used to ask things like, where are you based? How many square footage? How many people? And sometimes I feel like saying, and sometimes I actually say, why does any of that matter? Don't you want to hear what we can actually do for you? Right. So if I have a gigantic, I'm originally from New York, so I'm not going to pick on a particular region, but like, let's say you're a giant firm and you have like this huge high rise on Park Avenue or something like the client is paying the rent for that, right? I mean, it doesn't make their work better just because you have a cool view of New York City, which don't get me wrong is cool, but like that doesn't make the actual work product better. So I think that there's a lot of misnomers when it comes to focusing on the things that matter. And I think the pandemic changed a lot of that. A lot of people went to remote. A lot of them aren't going back. Like we became fully remote. But let's go back to the beginning as to who the heck this crazy guy is and how I got here in the first place. So I'm originally from New York. And I originally, after going to school, was actually a technologist for the first almost decade of my career. And although I still love technology, I like to call myself a recovering technologist because I think a lot of the world does not care how technology works. They don't want to know all of the details about it, right? Like we're broadcasting from StreamYard. Hey, StreamYard guys, and you got a cool duck logo with some headphones. But normal people care about frame rate and RTMP and random acronyms. most
Yeah,
people
let's
don't.
talk jitter and latency. That'll be exciting.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
some of us, it is,
Just
but yes.
lose the whole stream into a whole conversation about jitter and latency and how, what band you're on what Wi-Fi level, so we can sit here and talk about the 802.11 AX standard and why it's better than Wi-Fi 5 and what the differences are. And we can talk about all the requests for protocol and the IEEE. And I'm already boring myself. I clearly, I know all this stuff, but I learned a long time ago that people don't really care how it works. They just want it to work, and they're mad when it doesn't. So after a realization of this in lifetime number one of career, I went out, put my own shingle out there, was still in the New York area at the time. And because my background was in technology and the web did not become the social web, it wasn't really Web 2.0 yet. I was kind of at a frustrating spot where, as many of us are when we're first starting our businesses, we don't know exactly what we're going to do. And the entire name of Now Sourcing is kind of a relic of the past, but it just already had a good reputation and we didn't want to change it. So Now Sourcing is kind of a play on words of all of the different forms of how outsourcing evolved. So everybody knows what outsourcing is, but usually there's a misnomer of understanding when it comes to outsourcing and offshoring. So a lot of traditional technology outsourcing back in the day was people thinking they would take technology, people, processes, and workers, and let's say we're going to ship it to India in particular, which was very popular at the time. So people would interchangeably use the wrong word. They'd say outsourcing, but they really meant offshoring. But then people started to get mad because things weren't being done in the same time zone. There could be cultural differences. Malcolm Gladwell talks a lot about the power distance between a boss and a worker. So Americans are crazy cowboys, and people in India operate on a very different level. And I don't want to ruin the whole book, but there's different cultures that you would never say what you would say in America.
Oh,
to
totally. And every
say,
country almost has its unique
every country is very different.
For sure.
There are different countries that have a lot of similarity of the distance of power. So for instance, America and Australia are very close in terms of how ridiculous we are compared to the conservativeness of the rest of the world. But culturally, we're very different. We're on complete other time zones of the world. Or if anybody's watching in Australia right now, it's another day, right? So it's kind of insane. But so we just had decided we were going to be a fractional technology advisor kind of a thing. And instead of offshoring, there was a word near sourcing that was becoming popular. So why go all the way to a very different country and a very different culture if you could go to Canada or something, right? So then we had more of the concept of on demand now, and hence Now Sourcing was born.
And companies often outsource or offshore to save money. At least that's been the rap.
Yeah.
Often bad rap on that, but you were doing more than that. I assume you were cost effective, but how did you shift into the value added sort of space you are in now? Because you just do tremendous work that's beyond just
there were a couple of hops. So
outsourcing.
right now we were talking about version 1.0 of Now Sourcing, which is the young and dumb version of Brian trying his best. So basically after year one, my wife and I, who co-founded the business with me, we left New York and we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, which is a rather different culture.
The tech center of the world, as everyone knows, Louisville.
Right.
Louisville, right? Is the
I always say Louisville because I try to explain to people that there is no King Louis, and it was named after the 14th, but I digress.
I've been lectured about that, met multiple times. So Louisville, yes.
And usually there are.
What was that like? That must have been from New York to
it was
Louisville.
A little bit
must have been
a shock. I remember we first had to go out there for more of a personal matter out in August of 2001, 2 months before the towers fell, because we were in New York in 9/11.
Wow.
And we just were like, wow, this place is amazing. And we're like, why don't we go back to this place? And so we did. Eventually, it was a few years later. But it was actually really cool. It's a beautiful, idyllic city. I think a lot of people.
Blue Hills, Kentucky Blue Hills. And amazing.
Grass and stuff.
Bourbon.
Yeah. Lots of bourbon, horses, lots of good things. Good quality lifestyle out there. But eventually, it wasn't exactly a personal fit for our family. So we eventually moved a little upriver. We're still in the same region. We're in Cincinnati. But through the years, we've had multiple offices. Since the pandemic, we're completely office-less and we're 100% virtual, which I kind of like, which we could have a whole separate show for and give you all sorts of perspective on that. But let's just stick to, all right, so we had version 1 where it was more the technology side. And we were also like building websites, being technology advice for different kinds of companies. But around 2005, 2006 was that special moment of the internet when the social web became a thing. And we were there very early. And given like my weird polymath background of things that I'm good at and other people that were on the team, it was actually like a really good fit for social. And back in the day, like I think we were the first place to ever do like social stuff for places like Deer. We were working with Jay-Z when the Blueprint 2 album was coming out, and he had the apparel brand that he sold to a conglomerate. So we were able to do some really cool stuff. And we were in early. We had certain kinds of specialties. Very early adopter of Twitter. We were advising people with Facebook things before. Do you remember when Facebook literally didn't have Facebook pages and you had brands that like literally had to be like an account and then they had a migration? It was the wild.
I forced Facebook from my memory banks, but yes, I have vague recollection.
I mean, we're not streaming on Facebook, so we don't have to be.
Actually, we are to my.
Oh, we are. Okay. We love you. Don't cancel. Yeah.
Maybe my mother. So hi, Mom. But yes.
Good. Yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean, every platform is as good as how you use it, how you set the filters and all that. But, you know, separate conversation. So back in the day, social was kind of the Wild West. And I kind of found like a special niche of really getting a lot of attention to things, curation of things, coming up with content, coming up with viral ideas. So I bring back to a reminiscent part of the internet. This is probably now about, oh man, I'm going to sound like an old guy. What is this, like 2009, 2010 or so? There used to be a site called dig.com. It still exists today.
It's still out there. Yeah.
It's still out there, but it is completely reimagined. It's not the same thing. It's not the same spirit, and it's not the same function. So the web has changed dramatically. But back then, there were, how's this for a statistic? There were about 100 people, just random individuals sitting with trees in their background or whatever, that would be responsible for controlling like 50% of the content that would hit this front page of this major website. And if you had a piece of content that would hit this front page, like it would get so much simultaneous traffic, like your website would just fall over and crash. It was absurd because it was like the spot. Journalists would flock over there. Everybody, it would be like the tastemaker of the times because information didn't flow then the same way that it does now. It's a lot more sophisticated now. It's a lot more corporate owned. But back then, there was a lot of like human curator stuff, and it was a very much crowdsourced creator economy that's very different than there is today. But I was one of those people. I was one of the 100 that was really kind of pulling the levers in the background.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So it was a wild time. And I got to see a lot of like the really weird part of the internet because, you know, when you're able to like control things in that manner, you become very popular and useful to a lot of people. So I knew that that wasn't going to be forever when they started not listening to their users and banning people, and it started to lose its feel, and eventually it sold out and like completely changed where it's really just a shell of what it used to be. I'm not going to be hypercritical to it, but I mean, it used to be so much more powerful as a source. You wouldn't go there as a source. Like now it's just like yet another media thing.
Okay? Well, these things come in waves, right? So now we have Reddit. Reddit is I think the dig plus more.
Right.
Our era, amazing.
Yeah, that's crazy. Dig was much more powerful than Reddit back then, if you could believe that.
Wow.
And now it's completely the opposite direction. In any case, I knew that I didn't want to do social media, whatever that is, forever. We were very heavy on content and virality and getting picked up and links and SEO and press and stuff. So back then, we were a small team, and I said, all right, let's take stock of what we're going to do, because social is exploding in so many different kinds of directions. It's really complicated, and you can't be good at everything. Like everybody says that they're like a full service, whatever. I'm just like, you are so full of crap. Like there's no way you can be good at everything. Like you don't have enough time or enough people on the clock to ever be good at everything. It's just impossible. Like different people say riches in the niches, specialization is everything, right? Like it's just, it can't be done unless you acquire like specialists that do everything, I guess, but that's a really hard road. So at most we can just be among the world's elite at a few things, right? That makes sense. Like influencer marketing, that's its own thing. You wouldn't be influencer marketing and PPC and ads and print and TV. Like it just makes your head explode.
And what fun is that? Right.
Yeah, like, and you should have fun with it. Like, who wants to show up and just be mediocre at everything? That just sounds like such a joyless life. In any case, so I knew that wasn't going to be forever. I saw that social was going in so many different ways. And I'm like, all right, guys, like, what are we really good at? really good at telling stories, doing things visually, and then making it viral, whatever that means, or just amplifying it, or having influence, getting press, getting attention, getting traffic, getting SEO, like all of these things, looking at it as a dimensional grid, but tying it all together. So back at the time, this is 2008, there were maybe, I don't know, like 3 people on the planet that were doing infographics. So this is years before everybody really saw this as a trend. And I
What's
said,
the origin of the word infographic? Do you have any history on the actual term of art?
yeah, I
Infographic.
mean, there's a lot of different things. Like you could say that, like, depending how far back you go, like you could say every society has had them, hieroglyphics have them, um, medieval times could have different things, cartographers certainly had different aspects of it. So it really depends on how you understand what an infographic is. I think like when USA Today was in print, they would do like a lot of simple graphics and stuff. So that was kind of more of a modern day thing.
Oh yeah,
But
back I remember that well. Yeah.
as I think that's kind of not really the same thing, right? Like I wouldn't really, if I were to write a dictionary definition or a timeline or encyclopedia definition, Wikipedia definition, even though a lot of them say that, I don't really think that that makes sense, right? Like if you want to say a helicopter started because Leonardo da Vinci made like this weird looking flapping thing, that's kind of ridiculous, right? So I guess like there's some weird outdated version of it, but the modern day stuff really kind of hit the scene right around 2008 or 2007, something around that.
Wow.
So
That's not far long ago at all. Yeah.
no, it really isn't. So we were one of the first ones that really kind of made that a specialization and a vehicle for getting all of the press and attention. And at the time, I thought that how shall I say this? They really did not reach their full potential. I thought that the artwork was inferior. I thought that they didn't do enough of a job of a good storyline, of an emotional hook, right? They didn't really have a call to action. They didn't really understand a lot of the business side of it. They didn't really call out enough stats that are more journalistic. There's a lot of different opinions in this type of economy. So to give you like one major fight within industry that people have is the difference, because a lot of people use these words interchangeably. Some people will call this kind of world an infographic. Other people will call it a data visualization. But I will tell you, they're sort of like polar opposites within the same industry. So a data visualization is more of manipulating a chart and data. An infographic, in my opinion, is more of data journalism, if that makes sense. So there are people that all they do is specialize on the data visualization side, but sometimes that's interesting to news, but usually that's like a smaller format and really calling out one specific piece of how to look at the data. We know that people aren't going to read. This is an absolute fact. Maybe,
Busted.
yeah,
Yeah. Guilty as
I'm going to
charged.
say maybe about 25 or 30 years ago, there's a guy by the name of Jacob Nielsen, who's commonly regarded as the father of all internet usability. He said something really interesting that I think about a lot. He said that people don't read when it comes to the internet. He didn't mean that as an insult, because a lot of people, it's like, you can't tell me how to think. No, that's
Yeah.
not what we're saying. We're not saying that people don't have the capability of reading. We're literally saying that they don't read. The human mind works differently when you're on a screen that is scrolling. People do a completely different thing with their mind that actually lights up differently in the areas of the brain, and it's called chunking. Chunking is very interesting because what it's basically doing is your brain is hurrying around looking for what it should pay attention to. So if you think about an article as compared to an infographic, you ever see that the articles that really stand out are your favorite newsletter or whatnot? It's usually like it's got a really cool font to it. It has like a standout title. It has very clear formatting for different sections. It might embed video or some different images. It always has a really cool header image, sometimes really hand drawn. And all of this is by design because they know that they're not going to get you to pay attention until they can convince you to pay attention. And that's what the infographic shortcuts. It gets permission in your mind for more attention. So instead of even playing the word game, and what's interesting is if you actually sat and consumed every piece in there, you're probably going to be sitting at least a 2.5, 3 minute to 5 minute read. So it is a large format article. but it's put together in a pace that is going to allow for the quick scan, allow for the deeper dive, and even allow for better rapid cognition and stuff that you would remember later that you wouldn't actually remember in just text, which is
I
sort of
love it.
insane.
And what's the design process? Because, looking at this infographic, there's just so much information, and yet it's just so visually appealing, and the
Yeah,
imagery and the format and the colors are all
yeah, it's
great. I mean, that's a lot of work, it seems
it
to.
sure is. And I think you're hitting on a really good question, Evan. And I think this is like the key and the difference between success and failure. So I think a lot of people who are not designers dive into some random template thing and then they wonder why their project sucks and nobody likes their ugly baby. It's like, well, let's say you're a publicly traded company. Are you really going to use like clip art and like word art from a lifetime ago? Isn't your stock
Right.
going to go down? Like, it's so unprofessional and uninteresting. So visually, they are not very compelling. But even before you get to the visuals, we have a whole research team. And before we even get to that, there is another piece that I got to say. So a lot of people make the wrong idea. They just don't come up with an idea that's interesting enough. Imagine,
Right.
Evan, that I'm going to send you a DM as an influencer, or if you're a journalist, I'm going to try to get in your DMs or send you an email or something. If the only thing I have, instead of this beautiful visual canvas with all the information as it, let's say I only have that title, can I make the title interesting enough to grab your curiosity, to not throw it in the garbage, not mark me as spam, but to literally like get it to the point enough where you're going to open that email and at least consider, is this something that I want to interact with?
Right.
Right? If you're not coming up with a good enough idea, you're probably going to fail. Is it interesting enough to a wide band of people and journalists and social and the target market or not? If it can't reach the sword and the scalpel, I guess you could say, you've probably failed before you've begun. And a lot of people get very greedy when it comes to their content online and they think they can just pay for everything. Well, when you pay for ads and stuff and you can say whatever you want, that's one thing. But that's not always effective on the earned organic content side of things, where there's humans that are deciding, is this worthy of going somewhere, right? And that makes a big difference. So it's pretty frustrating when it comes to that. So I think getting that idea right is important. Go ahead. Sorry.
What is it? What is the how does it work engaging with a client? I mean, it's often a challenge working with clients in the best of times.
Yes.
When you have deadlines, when you have very creative work product, lots of eyeballs and review, that must be a challenge versus the written word or even the video word, which video editing is pretty straightforward.
Mm.
It must be kind of a intense engagement.
It sure can be, especially when we haven't worked together already. So that kind of just depends. People that already kind of know our shtick and have worked together, they get it. They trust us. But sometimes I think people like they're good at a thing and then they decide they're good at what we do. And it's like, well, if you're already good at this, wouldn't you just do it and not hire us? Like, I think sometimes people have to understand if people have really good expertise and stuff, you probably should try to trust them. Maybe take some of their recommendations and stuff. I don't know. Like if you do influencer marketing, Evan, like, am I going to tell you how to do influencer marketing? Like, it's just so easy. You just snap your fingers and everything's easy.
Right. And everyone has their reads the headlines in the Wall Street Journal and just figures out, okay, this is the way the world is.
Right.
So what's next for you and your team besides continuing to do great work and delivering on value to clients?
Yeah.
Like, is there a next big thing for you? Is the metaverse? Are we gonna? Is it animation or what's going to catch our attention next?
I think about that a lot. I think I like to spend a decent piece of my brain on future tech, innovation, R&D, because I don't really think of us as an infographic company. I kind of think of us as a content marketing company. A few years ago, I kind of had enough of the way we were being labeled. So I usually say that we make the ideas better, the world's ideas better by making things simple, visual, and influential. I think that's just a better way of understanding it. But to comment about future tech stuff, because I know you and I can geek out about that for hours on it.
Sure.
Future tech frustrates me significantly because I think a lot of it is very promising and a lot of it has not entered the public's consciousness of their reality and utility. So right now we're very early when it comes to a lot of those things. Take something like virtual reality and augmented reality, or now we just call it the metaverse because we just threw a bunch of things in a cauldron and stirred them all together. I mean, I remember like we launched the first virtual reality infographic on a stage at South by Southwest
No
in
kidding.
2016.
That's
This
pretty
is
funny.
years ago.
How was it received?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enough for me to not really spend a lot of time on it. It wasn't like I'm a big VR, AR, MR, XR, metaverse proponent. I just think that I think about the pipeline of the internet. And although everything is Web3 and everything's amazing and we're all going to fly in cars in 5 minutes, we don't, right? I think a lot of this stuff is good as long as all of the tech is up to speed, as long as the internet bandwidth is up to speed. Think of an age ago, when showing my age a minute, like when we first got to like the whole dot-com boom and bust in 1999 or 2000, 7% of America was on broadband, and that's it. So you could never deliver a Netflix. Nobody had smartphones yet. You didn't have GPS. Like enough of the basic, significantly advanced infrastructure did not exist to build the things that require a certain level of infrastructure and pipeline. So if you have rural internet or not great computers and things don't natively have like all of the toys that you need to make these things work, it's kind of meh, right? Like most people do not want to walk around with some of these headsets because they haven't solved form, fashion, battery, balance. Like I wear a yarmulke and glasses, and it's really complicated to wear some of this junk on your head, right? Like pretty soon you should just be wearing this stuff as a contact lens. But right now, a lot of it's crude and bulky, and it's all getting better. I'm not going to criticize all these things. I think that they're admirable. But everybody who years ago was already big into like virtual reality, which has been sitting on the shelf for decades, a lot of them crashed and burned. Like you look at places like Magic Leap. I don't really want to throw names, but I'm saying significant companies have taken tremendous amount of capital and haven't produced a lot of stuff that the majority of people use. Like if you actually ask people out in the world, what percentage of people have ever tried virtual reality, have ever tried any level of augmented, mixed reality, metaverse, any of this stuff? Aside from like playing Roblox and things like that, a lot of people have not experienced it in a way that they practically can use. Now, I think we're coming at an interesting point of singularity where a lot of this stuff is getting better. The way the world of work has changed, the way that we interact with people has completely changed in our work and personal lives. So I think we are going to see the confluence of a lot of these things, but like people like you and I are like ahead of the game. Like you're a whole like Web3 creator and you do like all that rally stuff and like you get into it, but it's just not for everybody, right? Like it's not there yet that it has had any kind of like mass global adoption. I know everybody cheers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, technology comes in waves, and
Sure does.
I
Yeah.
love that your content, is suitable for the digital and mobile social world, but it's also suitable for like a magazine, an
Exactly.
insert,
Right.
direct mailing.
It's a
You know,
multi-tool. It's
know,
like intentionally
people
real.
still read the magazines in the back of the seat on
They
your
sure
flight.
do. Yeah.
It's
Listen,
pretty.
and I mean,
The
people,
world is not all digital yet.
what? People years later come up with like crazy ideas for stuff. Like, here's a utility that I saw years ago that I wouldn't have necessarily thought was the way to go. So sometimes what people do is, let's say you have a trade show or a speaking event, and you have a booth or something like that you want to impress people. So you go and you get one of those pop-up retractable banner stands
Oh
things.
yeah, the good old days.
Imagine the thing that you were just
I've
scrolling
schlepped
through on
those
the.
around many a years. Yeah.
Oh yeah, same, same. Don't get me wrong, but there's something special when you have like a 6 foot tall version of what I just showed
Oh
you.
wow. Very cool.
People walk up to the booth and like they're hypnotized. I remember
You know what
like
they do is they take pictures of it, and guess where they
yeah, they
post it
do.
on social
Yeah, I
media.
mean, I remember like there were people. They'd be like, "Could you move out of the way? Like we're trying to like get a video of it."
Great.
It's amazing. Like people, like we're all like, "Wow, digital's so amazing," and then we all get like weirdly excited when something is in print. People still get excited about being on TV, but TV is like kind of losing the battle against a lot of guys. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, look
Well,
at the Super Bowl. Everybody lost their mind because there was a QR
yeah.
code and they didn't know what they were scanning. Like, it's weird. Like, it's okay to have like legacy technologies and the old world and integrate all of it, because the world is not just dependent on one direction, and people forget that.
Well, it's been really great catching up. Congratulations again, the number
Thank
one
you.
content marketing company of 17,000 surveyed.
Yeah, man.
Really quite an accomplishment. One
Thank
day
you.
I hope to have my own Evan Kirstel infographic. It's going to be
Yes, sir.
spectacular, and I will come to you, sir, when I need that. But really, look forward to keeping in touch on Twitter at Now Sourcing, not at Brian Wallace, but at Now Sourcing.
Too many Brian
And
Wallaces. Don't even bother.
yeah, don't even bother. But
Yep.
it's been really good catching up. And have a great Friday, a great weekend.
Thank you. You as well. I
All right.
appreciate it.
All right,
Thanks,
sir. Bye-bye.